Headliner Nation, it is movie night in your household, and maybe you and your spouse, a little alone time. You've got a nice bucket of popcorn, maybe sipping a nice glass of red. You pop a movie in, and all of a sudden, Leonardo DiCaprio pops up on the screen, or Jennifer Aniston, or some sexy A-lister out there, and you look at your spouse and you think to yourself, they're giving him the googly eyes. What's going on? I'm right here. What are you forgetting about me? Listen, it's probably happened to you before. You're forgotten about because your spouse has taken a look at that sexy A-lister, and that's how these guys in this video feel today. They're being passed over. They're being looked over just because they're not those sexy top-tier picks. Well, hey, they might get the job done for you. They've been that way in the past. So take a look at some of these numbers I've got here for you and decide if they should find a spot on your roster come draft day.
Yeah. Analytics off the chain, all the channels not the same. Jake and Kyle, you know the name. Headliner Nation, we running the game. I'm a headliner.
Yo, what is up, Headliner Nation? Welcome back to the Fantasy Headliners. Kyle here to talk about some under-the-radar picks this season that in the past have shown us numbers that absolutely are worthy of a fantasy spot. This video is all about some guys that have been overlooked that you're just not remembering on draft day this year. And they've got ADPs that literally are going to cost you basically nothing. So because of that, maybe we need to reconsider a few of those guys. But I got to remind everybody, it is out and it is beautiful. The Fantasy Headliners 2022 Fantasy Football Draft Guide is now available for you. You can buy yours at the link below to thefantasyheadliners.com. So many awesome pages in it, but if you want to get one for free, you can also do that as well by heading over to Prize Picks, downloading their app, going to their website, whatever it may be, creating a new account, code word headliners, all capital letters, deposit $20. Not only are you going to get a free draft guide, but you are going to get this a shot at this Adam Thielen autographed, full-size, authentic, on-field helmet. This thing is absolutely beautiful. So again, head to prizepicks.com or go to their app and download it. Create a new account, code word headliners. You have to deposit $20. If you don't deposit the money, it doesn't count. But if you deposit that $20, you're going to get a free draft guide, and you are also going to get an opportunity to have your name put into the drawing to win this full-size on-field autographed Adam Thielen helmet. It is beautiful, but let's jump right into it, ladies and gentlemen. And the first guy up is Houston Texans running back Marlon Mack. I'm sure a lot of you aren't even thinking about him right now, but with an ADP of 150, though RB 49 overall, I can't help but wanting to grab Marlon Mack in almost all of my drafts. The dude isn't costing you anything. He's like an RB5 for your team, so why not take a shot at him? And one of the reasons why is because everybody wants to be the first guy on a rookie. Hey, I called Dameon Pierce from the Houston Texans. Sometimes you just have to realize that a guy like Dameon Pierce that went in the 4th round of the draft isn't always just going to step in and be that guy right away, especially when you've got a couple of guys ahead of him who have NFL experience. Rex Burkhead being the RB2 right now. I mean, he's done good in limited reps and kind of a backup role, but he's never been a bell cow. But Marlon Mack actually has success at the NFL level as a starter. If you remember, back in 2018, he ran for 908 yards on 195 carries, 9 rushing touchdowns, averaged 4.7 yards per attempt that season. Followed it up in 2019, took his rushing attempts all the way up to 247, ran for over 1,000 yards, 8 touchdowns, 4.4 yards per attempt. So the dude was good back in 2018 and 2019. Now, obviously, they brought in Jonathan Taylor. Marlon Mack dealt with some injuries, but now he's getting a shot with the Houston Texans. And during that time in 18 and 19, he was the RB21 in 2018, and then he was the RB20 in 2019, both in half PPR formats. Let's just say, for instance, worst case scenario, he puts up numbers like those, and he finishes as a low-end RB2, high-end RB3. Well, I mean, you got him as your RB5. The dude cost you nothing on draft day. So why wouldn't you want a guy like that that could potentially help you kind of get through bye weeks, injuries, whatever it may be? In 2019, it wasn't just volume either. He was actually a pretty efficient runner among running backs. 2019, he had 693 yards after contact, 12th most among running backs. He had 28 runs of 10 or more yards, which was 8th. He had 13 runs of 15 or more yards, which was tied for 7th. And then he had 324 rushing yards on those plays that went 15 or more yards. So because of that, he was 8th in the league. This is absolutely something that I wanted. I want to grab him all the time. These are numbers that I would love to have on my team. Numbers that I could grab as my RB5. Numbers that, if he were to put up in Houston, would be an absolutely excellent addition to the back end of your roster. And you might be saying, well, Houston's, they're not going to run it. They're going to be behind. Davis Mills was actually pretty darn good to finish the year last year. They've still got a guy like Brandon Cooks there that can stretch the field. And yes, they're going to be behind, but it's still going to be a team that's going to be able to move the ball through the air a little bit better than what we've seen in the past. And because of that, it's going to help them, not what we've seen in the past, but what we've seen recently, like very recently. Again, no Deshaun Watson. They were good at moving the ball when it was him and Hopkins, but last year, not that great. So let's move that out of our mind. Try to get back to what we've seen. Again, they've got Brandon Cooks. I think Nico Collins is still a little bit underrated as like a big play guy down the field. They've got a Phillip Dorsett, a Chris Conley, a John Mechie the third. So they've got guys there that have, again, some experience, a rookie that could end up stepping in and helping out right away. So for me, I still want to grab Marlon Mack. Again, he's not going to cost you anything. He's going to be good depth filler at the end of your draft, and we've seen him be able to put together plays like this in the past. So what about the tight end position? So before we get back to the other big positions, let's talk about the tight end position, because I can't get through a video without talking about tight ends, the football kind. What about Hunter Henry? I mean, the dude's ADP right now is 155, the tight end 18 off the board. I mean, everybody basically forgets that last season in 2020, he did have 17 fully healthy games, which is great. 50 receptions on 75 targets, just over 600 receiving yards. But the big thing was the 9 touchdowns. It led him into the top 12 of tight ends, gave him 128.2 half PPR points, leading him to be the tight end 9. So his red zone stats is really where he was the guy last season. In the red zone, 26 targets, which was tied for third. 9 touchdowns, which was tied for first, and 28% of his targets came in the red zone last year, which was third. That was the biggest that we have seen from really anybody. I mean, it was third, but in terms of the volume that he got, it was the biggest. There was a couple of guys ahead of him that didn't have nearly as much volume, and because of that, their percentage was a little bit higher. But when you took a look at it, Hunter Henry gave you both of those things. Now, Hunter Henry, you might be saying to yourself, you know, he's never been a big volume guy. And he hasn't, for the most part. For the most part, he hasn't. But he also hasn't been bad either. His numbers last year actually kind of rival what we've seen from him in the past. So his 75 targets last year, he had 76 in 2019 in LA. He had 603 yards last season, which the last 2 years in LA, he had 652 and 613. He averaged 12.1 yards per reception last year, second only to his 13.3 that he had back in 2016 in LA. So again, all those numbers kind of rival what he's done in the past with LA. So it's not like, oh, Hunter Henry had like this year that we're never going to see again from him. He's gotten this type of volume in the past. He's turned this type of volume into big plays. He's the guy in the red zone. And just imagine for a second that Damian Harris, 16 rushing touchdowns last season. Let's say there's just a little bit of positive regression there. I hate that word. I don't know why I said it. Let's say he regresses a little bit there and he comes back maybe towards 10 All right. That's still going to leave opportunities in the red zone for Hunter Henry. And who have they really added? Exactly. Devontae Parker is the only guy. Now, Devontae Parker is going to help that offense, but he's not necessarily going to be this big red zone threat over Hunter Henry all of a sudden. Hunter Henry is going to be the guy in the red zone. These are touchdown numbers that can be duplicated because of the type of player he is. Mac Jones has that connection with him when they get down towards the red zone. Hunter Henry going as a tight end 18. If you've missed out on the top volume guys, I say this all the time. There's two sets of tight ends. There's the guys that get the volume, and there's the guys that are touchdown dependent. And the guys that are touchdown dependent, you wade through, you find the guys with the best chances of scoring. Hunter Henry is one of those guys. He can be a starter in a 12-team league 100%. Now, let's get back to the sexy positions. Let's talk about Sony Michel for the Miami Dolphins. Nobody wants anything to do with Miami, and I get it. They signed 953,000 running backs this offseason. I understand that, and I understand why you'd be looking at it right now and being like, Kyle, I don't want any part of that backfield. But with an ADP of 171 and the running back 55 off the board, again, we find ourselves in a scenario where you're not really spending that much of a draft pick on him anyway. Your draft capital is very little for Sony Michel. Because of that, why not? Now, people, Chase Edmonds, Raheem Mostert, kind of the 1 and 2 right now. But Chase Edmonds really hasn't done much as an entire NFL career until last year when they kind of gave him the opportunity to be the guy. Now, here's the thing. Chase Edmonds was not re-signed by Arizona, and Arizona instead re-signed James Conner. And Chase Edmonds has been with Arizona for longer, so you would assume that they might be more comfortable with him. So if they had to re-sign anybody, they didn't. I think it is very telling that they decided to walk away from Chase Edmonds and decide to re-sign James Conner instead. Could it have been they didn't want to pay him the money? Yeah, but they ended up paying James Conner some money as well. And really, what would it have hurt? If you really thought Chase Edmonds was that big of a game changer and you've seen James Conner be a guy that has been disrupted by injuries in the past, why wouldn't you bring back Chase Edmonds? So for me, Chase Edmonds has some question marks there. Raheem Mostert, same thing. We've never seen him be able to stay healthy. He's dynamic when he is healthy, but we haven't been able to see him stay healthy. Sony Michel kind of falls into that category. But in terms of the lesser of three evils, I'm kind of buying into Sony Michel because he's coming off of the best stretch of any of these guys right now. At the end of 2020, he had to step in when Cam Akers and Darrell Henderson were both hurt for the LA Rams. So weeks 13 through 18, Sony Michel had 540 rushing yards on 129 carries and 3 rushing touchdowns. During that time, his ranks among running backs from weeks 13 to 18, first in carries, second in rushing yards. He was 7th with 4.19 yards per attempt. He was 7th with 3.05 yards after contact per attempt. Second, avoiding 26 tackles, and 5th with 0.2 avoided tackles per attempt. So Sony Michel was doing it all from week 13 to 18. Now, these teams are going to be a little bit different. Obviously, Matthew Stafford is a different quarterback than what Tua Tagovailoa is going to be, but the weapons there on the outside are really going to be just as good. Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle are absolutely electric weapons. And Tua is a guy that even though he gets hate on a lot right now, he's going to be fine. He's still got all the tools and everything that you would need for him to develop. So Tua is going to be fine. And if Tua can even be a top 15 quarterback with those weapons they have there and Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill, teams are not going to be able to stack the box. I'm betting on Sony Michel with this low draft capital to be the guy to make it out. Raheem Mostert is going after him, but he's nothing that I want to invest in. He's not a guy that I'm interested in grabbing right now because why? Yes, he's going to have some big plays here or there. Yes, he's going to get a little bit of work here and there. But the more I look at Sony Michel and his current ADP and what he could bring to the table, he is also a guy that I'm grabbing later in drafts to be like my RB5 just because it gives you so much potential. If he wins the job, if Mostert goes down, if Edmonds is ineffective, Sony Michel will end up being the guy there, and I think he has the best shot to do that. DJ Chark headed to the Detroit Lions. His ADP right now is 181, and he is the wide receiver 64. He's had some stretches in the past. All right. He hasn't been a guy that like you can rely on dependently for an entire season, and he's coming off an injury. But if there's no Jameson Williams to start, which we're not going to know for a while, okay? And that's why DJ Chark is kind of a safe grab right now at wide receiver 64, because we don't know about Jameson Williams yet. Now, if we find out Jameson Williams is going to play, you can throw DJ Chark to the side and say, forget about it. Again, he's not going to cost you anything at 181 overall. Back in 2019, though, from weeks 1 through 14, he was 14th in the league with 102 targets, tied for 14th with 67 receptions, 13th with 956 receiving yards, tied for 4th with 8 touchdowns. And oh, by the way, his quarterbacks, Minshew and Foles. Anything to write home about. By the way, I'm going to mention why I'm putting the quarterbacks in there in just a second. In 2020, weeks 4 through 11, 11th with 57 targets, 24th with 34 receptions, 25th with 425 receiving yards, and tied for 19th in touchdowns. His quarterbacks again, Minshew, Glennon, and Lutton. Okay, great. Now, last season, he gets Trevor Lawrence, and we really hope that that's a breakout year. Got hurt early on, but not bad numbers. 12 targets in week 1, only was able to catch 3 of them, but did so for 86 yards and a touchdown. Then 4 targets in week 2, not a great stat line there. And then bounces back in week 3, 6 targets, 3 receptions, 49 yards, and a touchdown. So he's had some injury issues. Last season he has that injury. The 2019, the 2020 numbers I showed you, those numbers right there are numbers that showed up either before or after an injury happened or in between injuries. So he's had some injury issues. But again, he's not going to be a guy that's going to cost you a whole lot. And the reason that I put the quarterbacks in there is because the big reason people are going to say, I don't want to invest in DJ Chark is because I don't want to invest in Jared Goff. Well, here's the thing. Back in 2017, Jared Goff helped Cooper Kupp to a wide receiver 26 finish and Woods to a wide receiver 32 finish. Watkins just behind him at wide receiver 38. In 2018, Woods finishes the wide receiver 10 with Jared Goff. Cooks is the wide receiver 13 with Jared Goff. And Kupp was the wide receiver 52. 2019, Kupp finishes as the wide receiver 4. Woods is the wide receiver 17. Cooks, not as good, wide receiver 62. 2020, his last season, Jared Goff in LA. Woods was the wide receiver 13. Kupp was the wide receiver 27. Reynolds was the wide receiver 64. So, can Jared Goff give you 3 really good wide receivers? No, he can't, especially with TJ Hawkins in there. But if there's no Jameson Williams, none, and DJ Chark is the deep threat to start the season, I can guarantee you that you're going to see some wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 numbers. And maybe he has a couple wide receiver 1 weeks mixed in where he has some really big plays and a big touchdown. For a guy that's costing you absolutely nothing, for a guy that's going to carry no risk because you're not really going to play him to start anyway, and if Jameson Williams misses the beginning of the season, now you've got a guy that can help you out if there's an injury. Maybe you've got like a bad matchup and you want to throw him in there because he's got a little bit of a better matchup. Teams are going to be focused on Amon-Ra St. Brown and TJ Hawkins in to start and DJ Swift out of the backfield. DJ Chark is going to, did I say DJ Swift? DeAndre Swift out of the backfield. And DJ Chark is going to get some nice one-on-one matchups on the outside down the field, and he's going to blow some guys away. Now, former teammates from last season who have now switched teams. Marvin Jones used to be with the Detroit Lions. Now he's with Jacksonville. Him and Chark were on the field for only a couple of weeks last year. But Marvin Jones, his ADP is 203 and he has wide receiver 73. Why is that? Jacksonville sucks. Trevor Lawrence had a bad year. They signed Christian Kirk. Jacksonville still sucks, especially on defense, so they're going to have to throw the ball. Trevor Lawrence, hopefully with a new quarterback coach and a new head coach in Doug Peterson, he can take a step forward. Christian Kirk doesn't bother Marvin Jones. They're not the same player. Marvin Jones will be the number 2 on the outside. Christian Kirk might be the number 1 on the other side, or he might play in the slot a little bit. But give me some Marvin Jones at a 203 ADP at wide receiver 73 overall. Because last season, again, if you take a look at it, it didn't amount to much because of the touchdowns, but he had 120 targets, 73 receptions, 832 receiving yards, and 4 touchdowns. I mean, is that awful? No. Is it great? Absolutely not. But it's also not the worst thing that we've ever seen, because if the touchdowns would have been more around maybe 8, he probably finishes them much higher and people actually get to play him more. The problem is just that the Urban Meyer's a moron and just doesn't know how to coach at the NFL level. But I think we're all forgetting, well, I'm not, but you all might be, that Marvin Jones, back in 2015, he was coming off a year with Cincinnati in which he missed the entire season. In 2014, he missed the whole year in Cincinnati with an ankle injury. In 2015, he comes back and he plays the entire season. Then he goes to Detroit, and then he goes to Jacksonville. Since 2015, his first full season back from that missed ankle injury, he has 701 targets, 18th most in the league. 427 receptions, 23rd most. 5,944 receiving yards, 16th. 44 touchdowns, 10th. He's played in 102 games, 10th. He's scored 1,289 fantasy points, 15th. And he has scored 12.64 fantasy points per game, 20th in the league. Tell me that's not some hella good consistency right there. That is basically overlooked every single season. Those are some pretty darn good numbers. And that includes a year in which he missed, I think it was 6 games with Detroit. No, he missed more than that. He missed 7 games, 8 games with Detroit in 2018. So if you add in those 8 games there, he's even higher up on the games played. He's even higher up on the targets, higher up on the receptions, higher up on the receiving yards. He's higher up on everything. And he's been, except for that one season, pretty healthy. I mean, everybody's investing in Christian Kirk way ahead of this. Why aren't we investing in Marvin Jones at the end of our drafts? And oh, by the way, during that time frame, among wide receivers with 400 plus receptions, Marvin Jones is 5th with 13.9 yards per reception. I'm going to take a second and let that sink in. Ready? 3, 2, 1, go. I mean, there you have it. None of these guys are sexy. None of these guys are probably going to win a fantasy league for you, but they have a great opportunity to establish some depth on your team, to help you out during injuries, potentially bye weeks, and maybe if someone does step up, they're a guy that you can trust to at least toss in there if you do have one of those major injuries, right? These are the guys that can help you maneuver through a season. These are the guys that, again, are not going to win you a league, but are going to help keep you afloat when you're dealing with issues that are out of your control. These are the guys that are really, really important to find in your league. So hit the like button for me. Subscribe here to the Fantasy Headliners, because we're dropping hella good content every single day. And leave me a comment down below. If you had to pick one guy from everybody I listed here, I need to know who it is. Who is the guy that you would pick out of everybody I listed here to put on your team? Headliner Nation, I'm going to get out of here. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll catch you all in the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.
Analytics off the chain, other channels not the same. Jake and Kyle, you know the name. Headliner Nation, we running the game. Y'all stuck on 3rd down. Your content's plain Jane. Headliners on top now. We gonna move and change. Podcast off the rip. Draft guide, so legit. Fantasy world, our game tight. You know we about that chub life. Stuck in a rut and you need some motivation. Head to the channel for this Headliner Nation. I'm a headliner.